I stood in the back of the wood-paneled law office, the air thick with cologne, leather, and secrets. The will reading had gone on longer than expected, full of formalities and financials I barely paid attention to, until the lawyer cleared his throat and read the final clause. To April Turner, the house located at 278 Glenmore Road, fully paid and maintained over the course of 30 years, is bequeathed in full as a token of enduring love and gratitude. The words echoed in my ears. I blinked once, twice. Surely I misheard him. But the lawyer didn't pause, didn't glance in my direction. He simply moved on, already turning to the next beneficiary as if what he had just said hadn't just cracked my entire life down the middle. April Turner. A name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in decades. I felt all eyes shift, a cousin's awkward cough. My eldest son stiffened beside me but said nothing. My knees nearly gave out, but I stayed standing. Pride can be a powerful drug, sometimes the only one you've got left. 30 years. 30 years of long shifts, overnight nursing duties, skipped vacations, careful budgeting. I'd packed cold lunches to help pay off that house. I never once missed a mortgage payment. Douglas always said, "What's mine is yours." Liar. That house was supposed to be our forever. I painted its walls. I planted its garden. I bled into that kitchen floor the night I miscarried our second child. I loved that house like it was part of my own body, and now it belonged to her. I didn't stay for the rest. I didn't want to see the pity, or worse, the relief in their eyes. I slipped out before the final paragraph, holding in every ounce of shame like a dam ready to break. The afternoon sun hit my face like a slap as I stepped outside. I wasn't crying, not yet. I just needed air. The parking lot blurred. I walked to my car in a haze, each step heavier than the last. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there. Silent. Frozen. Then, I saw it, across the street right in front of my home. A bright white sign had been drilled into the front lawn. For sale. Not even 24 hours after the funeral. Not even a phone call. April didn't waste a single breath. The ink on Douglas's death certificate wasn't even dry, and she'd already claimed my life as her victory. I stared at that sign for a long time. Longer than I meant to. A slow burn started in my chest. Rage, grief, betrayal, all boiling in the same breathless silence. That house was never mine, was it? And maybe neither was he. Douglas wasn't the love of my life, not in the storybook sense. He didn't sweep me off my feet or write me sonnets, but he was steady, reliable. A school teacher with a pension and clean nails. After a childhood filled with eviction notices. And shouting matches, that kind of calm felt like safety. We met at a community center fundraiser. He asked me if I believed in financial planning. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. He liked saving, planning, order. I liked that he didn't raise his voice and always wore clean socks. We married 6 months later. There was no honeymoon. We couldn't afford one. Instead, we moved into a small 2-bedroom on Glenmore Road, and Douglas began calculating mortgage, interest on a yellow notepad while I scrubbed linoleum with vinegar and hope. From the beginning, I worked the night shifts. As a new nurse, I had little seniority, so I took what I could get. Sometimes it meant 3 straight 12-hour shifts. Sometimes it meant sleeping on benches during 4-hour breaks just to make ends meet. Douglas said it made sense for me to handle the cash flow, since I was more emotionally attached to consumption. I think that was his way of saying, I liked groceries, so I paid the bills, the gas, the phone, the mortgage. He handled the budgeting spreadsheets and made notes on household depreciation. I should have asked more questions, but when you're in the middle of surviving, you don't pause to analyze the terms of your sacrifice. He wasn't cruel, just absent. Emotionally frugal, like he was afraid too much affection might cause inflation. He didn't hold me at night unless I asked. He didn't remember anniversaries unless reminded. He always kissed me on the cheek, never the lips. He kept a drawer in his study locked. Always. I never touched it. Marriage needs boundaries, he said. I accepted that. just like I accepted everything else. I remember once, our 7th year of marriage, I got home from a 16-hour shift to find Douglas sitting on the couch, eyes glazed over a crossword puzzle. I was so exhausted I could barely breathe. I stood there for a long time, hoping he'd look up and say he missed me. He didn't, so I went to the kitchen and made us both tea. That's the kind of woman I was. I didn't need grand gestures. I just wanted us to be a team. I was proud of our little home. I tended the garden every spring, painted the baseboards every fall. I clipped coupons, stretched chicken for a week, and still managed to tuck away savings. Every time I walked through that front door, I told myself we were building something together. I didn't know I was building it alone. It started as a flicker, something so small I almost ignored it. One spring, maybe 5 years before Douglas died, a letter came addressed to him in thick cream-colored stationery. I remember the name printed in elegant cursive. April. Turner. I stood at the kitchen counter, holding it for longer than I should have. I knew better than to open it. I placed it carefully on his desk. When he came home that night, I mentioned it casually. "You got a letter today, from someone named April." He froze for half a second. Then, without looking up, he muttered, "Old student. Nothing important." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But it happened again, once in the fall, again the next summer, always in that same thick paper, always with that same name. And every time he gave a different explanation. Former student, colleague, someone from his investment group. And then there were the trips. 2 or 3 times a year, Douglas would pack a bag and drive upstate to see an old friend. He'd be gone for 2, maybe 3 nights. He always brought back something generic, maple syrup, a hand-carved keychain. Nothing personal, nothing with thought. When I asked who the friend was, he'd shrug. "Just a guy I used to teach with. You don't know him." I didn't push. I didn't want to be the nagging wife, but doubt. Doubt has a way of growing in silence. One evening during Douglas's retirement party, his cousin Carol had one too, many glasses of Chardonnay, and leaned in close. "Doug always had a thing for April Turner," she giggled. "High school sweethearts never really die, huh?" My stomach clenched. I asked Douglas about it that night. I didn't accuse. I simply asked, "Did you ever date someone named April?" He put his fork down slowly, looked at me like I'd just accused him of murder. "Are you seriously interrogating me right now?" he said. "Marlene, this is why I don't share things with you. You twist everything." Then he got up and left the table. And I, like the fool I was, cleared the plates, washed the dishes, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. God, it did. I stayed up that night, wide awake in the bed we used to share. My side still neat, his side still full of weight, even in absence. Sleep didn't come. Not after the will. Not after hearing April Turner's name etched into my life like a final knife twist. The lawyer's voice had been so flat, so casual. All financial assets, investment accounts, and insurance policies are to be split equally among Douglas's sons. The house, located at 278 Glenmore Road, is hereby bequeathed in full to April Turner. No mention of me, not a sentence, not even a thank you for 30 years of marriage. I went through the motions all day. Coffee, dishes, laundry. But my hands trembled through every fold, every rinse. By the time night came, I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed answers. I walked to his study. The drawer, the one he always kept locked, waited silently, like it had been expecting me. The key was taped to the bottom of the desk. I had found it years ago, but never used it. That was the kind of wife I was, not anymore. The lock clicked open. My breath hitched. Inside, neatly stacked, were letters, dozens of them. Some yellowed with time, others fresh. I pulled out the first one. The handwriting was delicate, almost romantic. The kind of penmanship people used when they were young and still believed in forever. "Doug, I saw your smile on the news clip. It still makes me dizzy, even now. You looked handsome in that tie, the one I gave you after graduation." My stomach dropped. Each letter spilled a memory, a stolen moment, a fantasy of what could have been. She called him D, and he called her A. They had a language all their own, One envelope was thicker than the rest. Inside, a birthday card, pressed flowers, and a folded piece of stationery. I read it once, then twice. The words blurred, but one line hit so deep I thought my ribs cracked around it. I married Marlene because I had to. You were always my home. I dropped the letter. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the truth, written in his own hand. I was the obligation. April was the dream. 3 decades. 3 decades of splitting pills to afford bills, of swallowing loneliness just to keep the peace, of building a life I thought was real. He let me believe I was his partner, his family, but I was the placeholder, the woman he settled for, and the drawer he never let me open. It held the truth he never dared say to my face. 3 days. That's how long I grieved. Not for Douglas, but for the version of my life I thought I had. Then, on the 4th morning, I woke up with clarity in my veins. No more shaking hands, no more pacing halls. I walked into the kitchen, brewed a pot of black coffee, and sat down. At the dining table with a yellow notepad, it was time to take back what was mine. The lawyer's office was cold, clinical. The young associate looked at me with polite sympathy, the kind they reserve for widows with paperwork problems. I slid a thick folder across the desk, years of receipts, tax returns, bank statements. I paid for that house, I said, my voice steady. Not him. Me. He flipped through the documents, his brows lifted slightly. 93%, he muttered. You really did cover almost everything. Almost? I asked. Try everything. He leaned back in his chair, intrigued. Now. There might be a way, he said. It's a long shot, but if we can prove our sole contribution, we could challenge the request. At the very least, get it frozen. Do it, I said. All of it. That night, I didn't sleep because I was afraid. I didn't sleep because I was alive again. The weight of betrayal no longer crushed me. It sharpened me. A week later, a notice was filed with probate court, and 2 days after that, April came. To the house. I heard the knock while I was trimming the roses in the front yard. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door to find her standing there in a pale pink pantsuit, holding a designer handbag like it was a trophy. Her face was calm, confidence, like she'd already won. Hi, she said, voice dripping honey. I know this must be awkward for you, but I was hoping we could talk, woman to woman. I stared at her for a long, cold second. Then I stepped back, not to invite her in, but to slam the door. Hard. Let her talk to the paint. Inside, I stood in the quiet, my heart pounding. But not from fear, from something fiercer. For 30 years, I had been the woman who asked for nothing. Who endured, who forgave. That version of me died the same day Douglas did. And what rose in her place? She was going to burn every lie they built over my bones and build something better from the ashes. The letter was never meant to be seen. Not by the world, not by anyone but her. But the moment I read the line, "You were always my home," I knew it deserved the light of day. So I slipped it into a plain envelope and mailed it anonymously to a local columnist. The kind who dines on scandal and sleeps in gossip. The kind who knows how to set a match to dry kindling. A week later, the headline blared across every screen and newsstand in town. Wife pays for 30-year mortgage. Husband leaves house to former flame. Subheadline: I married Marlene because I had to. Reads emotional letter from late school teacher to secret longtime mistress. The fallout was swift. People talked. In church pews, in supermarket lines, in staff lounges. At first, it was whispers, then outrage, then outright shame. Not for me, but for him. For her, April Turner, the sweet-faced darling from Douglas's past, suddenly found herself ghosted by the community she had once charmed. Her book club dissolved overnight. Parents at the private school where she volunteered asked for her removal. No, one wanted to be associated with a woman who stole a home built on someone else's back. The court proceedings took 6 months. Long, grueling months filled with depositions, paperwork, and more gaslighting than I thought possible. April's lawyer claimed Douglas's intent was romantic legacy. That I, despite not being named in the will, had benefited from decades of residency. But my lawyer, young, sharp, and relentless, hit back with every receipt I had kept, every dime I'd paid, every deposit that came from my hands, and the letter. When it was entered into evidence, the courtroom fell into a hush. There, in black ink, was the sentence that ruined everything April had tried to polish. I married Marlene because I had to. You were always my home. The judge, a woman not known for theatrics, looked directly at April as she delivered the ruling. The decedent failed to disclose financial contributions from his spouse and misrepresented sole ownership in this property. In light of the overwhelming financial support documented by Mrs. Marlene Whitaker, this court finds in her favor. Full financial restitution is awarded. The property is to be liquidated and profits divided accordingly. I didn't cry. Not in front of April, not in front of her lawyer, who looked like someone had just stepped on his favorite tie, but when I got home, my real home, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, barefoot, and let the wind carry it all away. The house went on the market the following week. This time, it wasn't April's sign on the lawn. It was mine. She came to collect her things. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. The lock had already been changed. The attorney handled everything. She left a box of crystal figurines behind. Ones. I knew Douglas had bought her over the years. I donated them to a thrift store without opening it. Let someone else dust off her lies. Justice didn't come in fire and fury. It came in signatures. In silence. In the empty echo of her high heels. Walking out of my hallway for the very last time. That was the sound of victory. The cottage wasn't grand. It didn't sit on a hill with sweeping columns or have marble floors that clicked under expensive shoes. But it had light. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen window like warm honey, and every room smelled faintly of lavender and salt. The sea was just 2 blocks away, and when the wind blew in from the east, I could hear the waves talking to the shore. It was quiet, peaceful, and mine. I bought it with the settlement money, my share of the home I built and the justice I earned. No cosigner, no approval, no man involved, just my name on the deed, in bold ink, Marlene Whitaker. The first thing I did was tear down the ugly curtains and let the light back in. The second was adopt a cat. She was old, half-blind, and had a scar down her spine. They said she didn't take well to new people, but when I reached into the cage, she didn't flinch. Just leaned in, slow and deliberate, like she'd been waiting for me all along. I named her Ruth. She slept on the windowsill during the day and curled next to my ribs at night, like a heartbeat I didn't know I needed. I opened a small art studio a few months later. Nothing fancy, just a reclaimed barn with whitewashed walls, easels, and shelves lined with clay, pastels, and paint. I called it the Quiet Room. Women started coming. Some broken, some bitter, some just bored with being invisible. We didn't talk much at first. We didn't have to. We molded grief into sculpture, brushed shame onto canvas, and let color speak where words failed. Healing had a texture, and I let it wrap around me, every day. My sons visited. Not often. Just enough. To remind me they still existed. They sat stiff on the edge of my couch, eyes darting to the cat, then the books, then the door. "We didn't know you had this in you," one said. "I didn't either," I replied. "They didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. We spoke as strangers who used to know each other." And somehow, that was easier. Then came the letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. April. The envelope was thick. Apology, maybe, explanation, justification wrapped. In cursive, I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the backyard, struck a match, and let it burn in the bird bath. Ruth watched silently as the flame curled her name into smoke. She wanted closure, but I didn't need hers. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees and Ruth in my lap. The wind tasted like salt and promise. I watched the stars, blink one by one into a black sky, and listened to the steady beat of my own breath. For 30 years, I gave everything to a life that was never mine. Now, every moment was. It took 30 years to build that house, but it only took one woman, me, to build a new life